What's up, everybody? We're a little over a month out from the Leaving the Theater live show on February 11th at the Miracle Theater in Washington, D.C. The theme is Love on Screen, and we'll have a night of comedy, storytelling, and discussions of love in all of its forms in television and film. Tickets are currently on sale, and the link to them and details about the night are available in our show notes. Now, if you missed the early bird sale, you missed the $10 discount, but don't worry, we have one more sale for you. For this week only, we're offering a $5 discount if you use the code OSCARBAIT. Now, that code will expire on January 15th, so don't delay any further. Grab your tickets while you can. And per usual, if you're a member of the Patreon, there's a 50% discount available for patrons, and that's available until we sell out of tickets. I've posted that discount code in Patreon, so if you've been looking for another reason to become a patron, you should join us. And the link to join is also in our show notes. On today's episode, our guest is making her show debut, but we have a very in-depth and at times very fun discussion about a movie that is not so fun. However, if you enjoy our back and forth here, you could come see her at the live show because she is one of our panelists. All right, well, let's get to the review. Today's movie, Emancipation. I'm Ronald Young Jr., and I'm leaving the theater. Check. All right, this is Ronald, and I am leaving the theater after seeing Emancipation. Emancipation, directed by Antoine Fuqua, written by William N. Collage, starring Will Smith, Ben Foster, Charmaine, Bingwa, Stephen Ogg, Mustafa, Shakir, Timothy Hutton, and for a full cast listing, check out the link in our show notes. I'm not here alone. I'm here with someone making their Leaving the Theater debut. Lots of debuts happening. I am here with
Jonquilyn Hill.
Jonquilyn Hill, the accomplished, amazing Jonquilyn Hill. You'll hear more about her in my show notes. I can't give an introduction right now because I don't want to list her whole resume. But okay, so we just saw Emancipation, Will Smith's newest movie, came out 2022, post-slap, post-Oscars, 2022, of course. This is an Oscar-bait film. Obviously, it tells a story about the slave who, and I'm upset I did not get the slave's name. Or the guy's name. Yeah, Peter. His name is Peter in the movie, but I don't think that's his name in real life.
That's not what he went by. And that was a little, I was like, oh, I wish you would have said what he liked to go by. That would have been nice.
Yeah, agreed. But they called him Peter in the film, and you've all seen the picture. It's an iconic picture of a man with all kinds of whip marks on his back. Did you just get catcalled?
I don't know what just happened. Somebody was like, hey. I was like, oh.
I feel like, I'm standing right here.
I was going to say, I'm standing here with a man. Normally, that's enough.
Do those rules not work anymore? What happened? But it follows Will Smith, who's playing this person, Peter, who goes on, essentially, it is a fugitive movie. It is a runaway movie. He runs away from slavery, and it tells a story of what happens there. So let's get into it. What do you think of this movie? Now, I just also want to preface this.
That's a weighted question.
Yeah, no, I just want to preface this by saying I don't ever talk through movies.
I don't either. I'm really not unless it's like Best Man Holiday.
Yeah.
But there were moments where I was just like, you see what I'm seeing, right?
Yeah, this one felt like we talked through it because it felt like it was a lot of coping we had to do.
Yeah, it was a lot of coping, and then we were 2 of 4 people, and so I think that made it okay.
Yeah, exactly.
They were aunties, and they were gasping, and so it felt like I was like, okay.
They were also talking in their regular voices.
They were not. We whispered. I will say, I was like, oh, that accent was a choice. And I would be like whispering. They were like, And I was like, you know what? I respect that because that's relatable. I like that.
I feel the same. Like, it was like, I was sitting there watching it. At some point, I was like, I don't understand. If they were going to do this, they could have just watched it on Apple TV.
Okay. Yes. Unless they're like me and their Roku is old and isn't compatible with Apple TV.
You know, the Lord delivered you. You could just get a new Roku.
That is true. I should probably I'm going to ask for that for Christmas. That's a very good idea.
What are we talking about here? Okay.
Wait, so would you have preferred to see this at home or in the theater?
Well, let's talk about the movie and then I'll get to that because I feel like that's part of my evaluation process.
Okay.
So what did you think of the movie?
So overall, it felt like a very heavy Oscar bait movie, which to me is neither good nor bad. It kind of feels like a fact of life, like when the trees start to change color. Like, it's just like at the end of the year, you're going to get very serious films. And that's what this was.
I feel the same. I think this was very much like I didn't like The Revenant, and there were a lot of elements of The Revenant in this movie. But The Revenant, pretty sure, I think that was Leonardo DiCaprio's Oscar movie. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if The Revenant can exist and it's about one man's, going on a quest to do whatever it is he's trying to do. I don't even remember what he was trying to do in The Revenant.
There was just a bear involved. But also, and that's interesting too, because, I mean, we'll get to the Will Smith of it all, but this is very much an Oscar bait movie, but he already has his Oscar. And most of the time, like if this were... A lot of time when people receive their Oscars, it's not for the movie that they're supposed to get it for.
Correct. Denzel Washington.
Yeah, like Denzel Washington, Spike Lee, I think. Scent of a Woman. Why am I forgetting the star of Scent of
Al
a Woman?
Pacino.
Yeah, like it's one of those things. The Academy tends to be like, oh, sorry, my guy, here you go.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't get it this time, and because you didn't get it when it was socially appropriate to give it to you, we're going to give it to you when it's socially inappropriate to give it to you, and skip over the person who will probably get it in 5 years. And that's just how the Academy works.
And I think, we could do a deeper dive on this, but we could probably go down a list of actors who missed out as a result on performances in which they did a great... None are jumping to mind in this moment. I'm not saying that, like, it happens. If you could go back and look for a few years and say, this person should have won for this one because this was their only chance, and they lost it because it turns out that Will Smith, it was his turn. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's one of the biggest problems of the Oscars. But in terms of performance-wise, like, what did you think of Will Smith's performance in this movie?
I think his acting itself was good. Will Smith, he's not known for his accents.
No, and he opens with it, which is troubling.
It is. It's just like, ooh. And then they don't establish until later on why the accent is there. So the movie takes place in Louisiana, and I'm listening, and I'm like, so the thing is, there are a lot of different types of Southern accents. And at first I was like, is this supposed to be sort of like a Creole type thing? It doesn't sound like the New Orleans or Louisiana accents I know. But then they establish almost, I think, in the like last third of the movie that he's Haitian. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were speaking French, and I was just like, I don't have, or I assume French. I don't know French. It could have also been Haitian Creole. But I just wish, I wish they would have established that sooner. There are a few things about the character of Peter that I wish they would have established up top that I think would have really helped us for the rest of the movie.
I think this movie suffers from the fact that it's two movies. And I think you pointed it out early, but I don't think you knew how right you were until we watched the very end of it, which was that you said it's tough because this is, it's both a slave movie, but it's also I remember you said this is also a war movie. Mm-hmm. And I realized like they go full glory at the end of this movie in a way that I don't think helped it. I think, or if it would have been helpful for that to come a lot earlier in the movie and it not be so much about running away in the cat and mouse game.
Yeah, I wanted that part to be a little longer, and we'll probably get into this as we have the conversation, but what the movie did a good job of is establishing the cruelty of slavery so much to the point that it almost felt like, okay, we get it. And I feel weird about saying that because
we actually said, okay, we get it.
I was like, okay, we got it. Like, I turned to you and I was like, we got it.
All right. 3 really violent images in a row. It was
back to back to back to back. Like, if that stuff is triggering and upsetting for you, do not see this movie. Yeah. But yeah, it was just like they did a good job of showing the cruelty. And sometimes I hate saying like, oh, we get it, even though like I literally said that because it's just like, okay, this was real life. Like,
Yes.
like our ancestors went through, if not this, things very similar.
Yes.
However, the back-to-back nature of it, and also one thing about movies that involve slavery, they tend to have like these moments of joy.
Yes.
And I just think of so much of part of the Black experience is like, okay, we've been through these hard times, but it's like time to get our jokes through it, time to laugh through it. Like, watch a major event happen. Like, after the insurrection, people were cracking very funny jokes on Twitter as a way to cope. And
some of the sharpest stuff I've ever seen.
Like, I'm just like, it should be like, oh, you guys need to write. Yeah. Like, this is very smart and biting. Yeah. And I think, especially in the beginning of the film, they missed out on an opportunity to establish that. Yeah. And I think they could have done that and also shown the bond that he had with his family, because the drive to get back to his family that ultimately was his motivation. But they didn't necessarily show us why he had that motivation. They didn't, like, we had a brief moment in the beginning, but I wanted to see more of like the love between him and his wife, like his relationship with his children. And I think if they established that more in the beginning or shown it through flashbacks, because they open up with him being sold. And I think it would have been a lot better if it started in the moment of like, hey, I'm with my family. Oh, I just found out I'm being sold. Yeah. And then going from there. Like, they kind of jumped in with everything terrible right at once.
I agree. I think, and I like, that's one of my favorite parts about this podcast is doing a little bit of rewriting. Oh, yeah. And I think in this portion, I think you're right. It should have been established with more joy. And what they decided to go with was establishing who Peter was as a man of faith and a man of strength. And I think they did it by using his family as props, which wasn't enough for me to think. His faith is enough to get him through the entire movie, which I think they established, like, my faith will get there. But if the family is actually the motivating factor, then I think they had to dial down the faith a little bit in the film, and they didn't. And so they turned it into something where we're watching more of like an overtly religious journey rather than a man trying to get back to his family. And I've seen other movies do that story better, and they didn't do it well here.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like, and this was another thing that I was thinking, and I mentioned to you, but it's complicated because, one, he is a real person, and this is his real story. Yeah. However, y'all, he goes hand-to-hand combat with an alligator.
Yeah. What was that?
Like,
is that real? Like, I had to know, was that part of the story?
I'm going to go home and Google it. Like, I'm going to look up some, because if that's real, oh my God.
Yeah, we should be talking about that.
Like, that's, oh my God. Yeah. And if it's not, it's so hard because it's so easy, I think, to fall into the magical Negro trope. Yeah. I'm not saying that.
The Bear Grylls of it all, as we talked about.
You said he was literally Bear Grylls. Like, his survival myth, I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, this man needs to teach a class. Like, this is crazy. Yeah. Or I would even love to know, how did he learn all that?
Yeah, I guess the assumption was that, because my thing is, there's an assumption when I see them building stuff and you see like black handymen and all that come out of this, that are starting their own shops, starting their own butcher shops, all of that. I'm assuming that this is all training that they got when they were working as slaves. Mm-hmm. So then they take that and try to build it out as a trade and use it to make money for themselves. But this dude knew so many things in the field about survival, and he says, oh, I know the swamp, which is enough. I like that exposition as a way of saying he has some sort of history with the terrain, but to say about survival itself, it seems like you guys are like, come on, like, you're not giving me enough for me to say, like, is this man a survivalist? Like, at one point, he is smoking out bees. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, how do you know? Why would you know that?
Yeah, and again, like, it's complicated because, like, so much of it is rooted in truth. Like, again, like, families from the South. Yeah. Like, I have great uncles who are like, oh, I need a sassafras root. I don't need a doctor. Like, I'll be fine with that. And they were. And they literally were. It fixed everything. I don't know how. Yeah. And, even the faith thing of, like, like, I'm a person of faith, grew up in the church. Like, I get
me as well. Like, I get that part. Yeah.
Listen, it can move mountains. Yeah. But I'm like, do it be moving mountains like this? And that's not that makes it sound like I'm like, but I am a little bit like, it can make you do hand-to-hand combat with an alligator? Yeah. So, oh, wow, I need to pray harder.
Yeah, no, I think that part gets me too. I like the faith of it all. I really I didn't mind that. Like that was fine. But I think it was the knowledge of it all and the way they kind of just made this guy an everyman. And at some point, so much so that when we get to the parts where he's at war, when we get to those parts, and I'm sorry if I'm spoiling this movie, but it's a slave movie, and I don't really care if I spoil it for you.
We
but
know what happens. The Union wins.
Yeah,
the United Army wins.
Yes, the United Army wins. But with that being said, it seems like at some point for him to have this type of knowledge, it was so much so that my movie brain switched on. And when I saw him fighting in the field, I was like, oh, he's about to win the whole war with one shot, or he's going to go hand-to-hand combat and kill like 10 people on the way in. But I'm like, no, this is a Civil War movie. They didn't do that back then. This isn't like I'm not watching the MCU, but the way they were filming it was making it about one man's experience. And I think the stakes are too low if it's about one man's experience, unless you're just going to make it about him just getting back to his family, and you didn't establish that enough. So for him to be an everyman who's like surviving through the woods, who has a strong faith, and all of that does make for a good story. There's elements of a good story there. I just think sequencing, they could have done a little bit more to like really drive that point home.
Yeah, like I think this is a man whose story definitely deserves to be told in film. Like this is a great idea. And I think if the stakes had been different, I think, I don't know, even if there's like a thing at the beginning where someone's like in a museum and like, oh, this photo, like what's the story behind it? And then we go back through time just to kind of like establish that. Like all of the things were there, but I just wanted to, I'm like, can we reorder this? Can we shorten some stuff, lengthen some stuff? Like it was like, okay, it doesn't need to be this bloated. It doesn't, this story is important, but like, wow, we're doing a lot. Because a lot of it just became about, and granted, like, again, this may be realistic, but the idea of this guy hunting down one single man, like, there's a war on.
Yeah. And
you are expending your energy doing this much. And hey, racism is a sickness. Yeah. It probably drives people to do some awful things. Yeah. But like, how are you allowed to just be like, who's back at the camp? Like, what's going on? Yeah. A whole bunch of other people left, including like other white soldiers who were deserters. Like, what's going on here? What are we doing?
The vendetta of a slave catcher doesn't really make sense to me there. And also for him to put his life at risk to be that close to Union soldiers, knowing that he's at risk just to like what, for you to satisfy a vendetta and to say a pithy line at the end, that was very Hollywood. But I would venture to guess that that's not a part of like the main story. I would say that they put that in to like make it more entertaining. And I don't know that it really served its purpose. Now, we've talked a lot about the movie. Let's and we'll rate it here shortly, but let's quickly talk about the slap, because I want to know, do you think the slap colors how this movie is received? Because I know I was talking to a friend of mine, Curtis, who's actually been on this podcast, who actually said, he's like, I'm not seeing that movie. He's like, I don't really care about Will Smith or the slap or nothing. He was like, I'm just tired of slave movies. And I was too. Like, even the best part about seeing this movie was seeing it with you.
Oh yeah. Like, I told you, like, I think we were probably 5 minutes in, and I turned to you, and I think that's also why we were talking through the movie, because it's just like, oh, this is upsetting.
Yeah. Yes, agreed.
Like, this is very upsetting.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I forgot that I always leave movies about slavery charged up. Like, I'm like, yeah. Like, I was there, and I was like, I will fight anybody. You better not talk to me crazy. I'm pissed. Yes. I'm mad. Like, yes. And that's what it's like. It's like when you watch Roots for the first time and you're like,
or Glory.
Well, yes. And you're just like, you know what?
Yeah.
Nobody better say anything to me Monday at school, because I got something for him. It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just, I mean, I get that. I get not wanting to see them. I'm a little bit like, but it's also I think, again, it's that Oscar bait thing, because like, I feel similarly about movies about like the Holocaust. I feel similarly about seeing like Hotel Rwanda, yes, or like Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah, like one and done.
Like, it's just like, all right, y'all, okay. Yeah. And so like, I respect people that are like, you know what?
Yeah.
This is real. It's very heavy for me.
Yeah.
I'm not in a place to see it right now. I still, because maybe this is embarrassing, I still haven't seen 12 Years a Slave.
I don't think you need to.
Because every time I'm like, oh yeah, I should see that movie, I'm like, wait, I'm not like in the place right now to see it. It's not like, I'm not a person that avoids movies about slavery because of it, but I gotta get, like, on the way here, I was like, all right, we listened to our calm, peaceful meditations. We journaled. We're ready. We can do this. And like, I have to hype myself up. I have to like prepare myself for like the crazy, like upsetting movies. And it's real life. It's real stuff. Yeah. But like our world is very upsetting.
Yeah, and I think if you didn't see a slave movie before 2020, you don't need to see one now. Honestly, if you didn't see a slave movie before 2016, I don't think there's any need to go see one now, especially since life is upsetting enough without you adding on the historical aspects that make living this life even tougher. But with all of that being said, my friend who says he's never going to see a slave movie points out about the Will Smith of it all. And I'm wondering, I mean, Will Smith chooses, and he had already filmed this before the slap. So he makes this movie, the slap happens. It is an Oscar bait movie. It should be in contention to win an Oscar. This is a weak year, so it should be in contention to win an Oscar in a lot of things. The cinematography was great.
Cinematography. The cinematography probably should win. Yeah.
So the cinematography was great. I mean, I think his performance deserves a nod, at least, even if they know that he's not going to be there. You're not gonna let him win. You know what I mean? So I'm like, why not just like? I feel like there's been worse actors who, Casey Affleck won the year he was he was on stage accepting an Oscar in front of Denzel Washington after being alleged to like have assaulted or made women feel uncomfortable.
Freaking Roman Polanski.
Don't even get me started on that guy.
Still a member of the Academy?
I'm almost positive. I don't know if they revoked his membership. I know they revoked Harvey's.
And we saw everything that it took for that to happen. Yeah. And it had to, and it's stuff that had been happening and been an open secret.
Oh, well, more than likely they're going to give, as a slap on their own wrist, they're going to give that movie, She Said, an Oscar. And I haven't seen it yet, so I've heard a lot of good things, but I imagine that movie's going to do well at the Oscars because of politics in that way.
Also, I'm a lot like a Hollywood person where they're like, I love movies about Hollywood. Yeah. It's like, you guys are doing a journalism? I'm give Spotlight all the awards.
Yeah, I agreed. But where do you land? How do you think it's going to be received with Will Smith? How do you think they dance that line?
I think there might be a script nod, a director nod, probably cinematography. Yeah. Best film is a stretch. I do not think they're going to nominate him, which is very I'm kind of I'm one of the few people where the slap did not ignite anything in me. There were people who were like, Chris Rock deserved to get the taste slapped out his mouth. Mm-hmm. And there were people who are like, how dare Will Smith? Yeah. This is a tragedy. Yeah. I'm upset. I am. I was talking to my parents about it, and they were like, seeing another black man hit another black man, that's awful. And I was like, it really didn't move me that way.
Did y'all watch boxing in the 90s?
Y'all grew up watching the fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just honestly, I sat on my couch and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Hollywood. And then I went on about my day. Yeah. And so the consequences, they are surprising to me. I'm not surprised because is it 10 years?
10 years. And I'm every year over 3 I was just like, this is way too much.
I would have just said a year, you're on some type of probation. Yeah. You need to go out and talk about anger management. Correct. And how we solve our problems, blah, blah, blah. It was just, I feel like the reaction was outsized.
Yeah, 100%. I think we know that. And I think what gets me is the social, the hand wringing and the way people reacted to that. It felt overwhelming. Seeing as these were the same people who were posting about, still listening and still being just finding out and where and listening to black folks after 2020 George Floyd,
I'm listening and I'm learning. Yeah, and it's okay.
Yeah. So I'm what did you learn in that? Because I'm for me, seeing, and I don't even want to get into the politics of a black man slapping another black man in defense of his wife. Because I've had conversations later where I remember somebody said to me recently, she was she should have let him defend himself. And I was I don't know how feminist that argument gets when you're talking about black women and a black man doing that type of thing in front of a room full of white people. Because I'm it feels like you're walking a tricky line there, and you don't know enough about the history, the historical context of why something like that happens.
Or even their relationship. There's I feel the two of them have a history. Yeah. Which that is, it's this is a personal problem between two very rich men. Yeah. And it just became something where it's what's going on.
Yeah.
And even I'm like, Chris Rock didn't even see that, but maybe that's. But I'm like, yeah.
I mean, he's going to make a killing, and he has a live Netflix coming that's going to come out probably in the next 6 weeks or something like that, where he's going to talk about it and make $1 million off of it.
Yeah, watch him like talk about it and then like be like, hey, here's my man Will, and like besties. Like,
I would love that. I would honestly, if he said, "Ta-da, we're friends," I'd be like, great. Then give him back give him back those 10 years from the Oscar suspension.
Yeah, I feel like, I don't know how recent it was, but there was definitely a selfie with a bunch of people. And I think it was fairly recent because it was a like Dave Chappelle selfie. But like Will Smith and Chris Rock were in it. They were not standing next to each other, but they were in the same photo smiling. Yeah. And part of me is like, all right, I think they've had their conversation. Yeah. And I think that is where... That's the important part. Like, that is between them.
He claims that he has not.
Oh.
Will claims that they have not spoken about it to this day. And that was as recent as his interview with Trevor Noah. But that being said, the selfie that you did see, it is Will Smith actually showing Emancipation to a bunch of people in the room, including Rihanna and Dave Chappelle, who was very close with Chris Rock. But Dave Chappelle was there. So in terms of like mediation and that conversation eventually happening, I think it will.
Oh, yeah, it for sure will. It for sure will. Yeah. And I think, from what I recall, there's also been, like, a history of him making jokes about Jada. And so, like, I can see, again, like, listen, I'm not going to slap nobody. Yeah. But I also don't talk about people crazy because I can't fight. And so that's just where I stand in life.
I got you. And I feel like I've had a history of being a hothead, but, like, seeing someone stand up like that for me, I think the one thing that I came to was like, do it in the back. Next time, just do it backstage. I think you should have done it, but I think you should have like, hey, can I talk to you in the back? Yeah. And we should have just been reading this as a rumor on TMZ.
Yes. I'm like, I should be reading this as like a blind item somewhere. Like it really is easy to be like, hey, let me have a conversation with you.
Yeah. Let me talk to you real quick. Okay. So all of that being said, how do you rate this movie out of 5 stars? What do you give it?
Ooh. This is hard because it's technically a good movie. Yeah. Technically, it's a good movie. Yes. However, I'm going to give it a 2.5. It was bloated. Yeah. I think, and honestly, that's mostly length. Yeah. Because it didn't have to be that long.
I agree with you, and I think I'm going to give it a 3.5, and I'm going to average our scores because I'm comfortable with this movie being a 3-star movie.
Oh, I'm very comfortable with it being a 3-star movie. Yes, okay. 3 stars.
But to also say that, I would also say I would not watch this again because I know my normal 3-star rating is I would watch this again. I would not watch this again. And Nick Hill is somewhere saying, what? That's not how the rating system works. But but it's true. I would not watch this again. I don't want to watch slave movies twice. I think that's all it is.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing of like, I only need to see Schindler's List once. I don't need to see it twice. It's like, hey, I get it. All right. Yes. Beautiful film. I understand. Yes. Yes. Time to go cope. Yeah.
Okay. So great. We give it 3 of 5 stars. Jonquilyn, thank you so much for being with me.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And with that, Leaving the Theater is a production of OhitsBigRon Studios. Thomas Tyra of Bias Studios mixes the show. Thank you, Tom. Show art from Heather Wilder. Theme music by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. For more information about Emancipation or Jonquilyn Hill, check out our show notes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at OhitsBigRon. That's at OhitsBigRon. You can find out more about this show and other OhitsBigRon Studio shows by following us on Instagram at OhitsBigRon Studios and on Twitter at OhitsBigRonStew. That's STEW. Leaving the Theater will be back soon. Thanks for listening. Leaving their, oh, God. Yeah, I crushed it already.
Yeah, all right. You did it.
Okay, so what did you think of the movie generally?
Okay. Sorry, I was waiting for that to pass.
Yo, I love that. You're an audio producer,
yeah,
yes.
I won't. I'm just
I love that.
I'm just like, oh, wait. Hi,
good, how are you? Okay,
Spike Lee even, like.
Yeah. Are you serious? We're trying to record a podcast here. Okay, go ahead. It's like he's waiting. It's like a buzzer. If you think about it.
Shut up.
You're saying there's a lot.